Oop, there we is.
Oh, cool.
All right. So yeah, we're live, going live on the Facebook, going live on the YouTube, going to talk about sports and stuff, being an athlete, being a queer or trans athlete, the things you need to know. Just gonna chill for a little bit, see if we can get some folks already in. But yeah, how are you doing, Megan or Meg? How's life?
It's good. It's good. You know, living here in Texas, it's really, really hot right now. It's
Child,
Saya, you would be sweating your butt off right now. It is
I would be
ridiculous.
so upset. And
It's
is
like
it humid too?
you said what?
Is it humid too?
Oh, it's so humid here. It's so
Oof,
humid. It's like the
I'm
moment
dying.
you try to sit into your car, you just feel like you're on fire.
Who wants that? No, Texas, the bad
You thought our
place.
summers in Denver were hard.
All right, so y'all, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Yes, I'm here with the Megan Moziniak, okay, from Toledo, Ohio. Did her undergraduate studies at Lourdes University, where she was a two-sport student athlete, representing softball and cross country. Child, I'm tired already. Has a lot of had a lot of involvement with orientation, being a peer mentor, and what they call the first year experience. Loves working with student affairs and higher education. Got her BA, bachelor's degree in social work with a minor in business administration. And then she said that was not enough, had to go on to University of Denver, get that master's in higher education, with focuses on diversity in higher learning, which, you know, is not too common. So we got to give a shout out to her for all of that work and why she is so talented. And so while she was at the University of Denver, she was also a graduate assistant, meaning she worked for the university, y'all, okay, for the Cultural Center, supporting 14 affinity student groups. Is any groups like the Black Student Alliance, LGBTQ student groups, Asian or Pacific Islander student groups, supporting student activists, and also created a program or created programming for the Cultural Center itself. So now Megan is at Texas Christian University and is working as a hall director in the housing spot. And, you know, I'm sure is making moves, causing waves over there. So welcome, Meg. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you so much for the intro. I just want to give a plug out to Saya because Saya and I went to grad school together. We were in different programs, but I would not have made it through grad school without Saya. Like we were two peas in a pod. We were doing all the things at the University of Denver to try and make it a better place. And so I could
Listen,
not
doing the
have made
best we can.
it.
Oh, I appreciate you, friend. And always we have Kendra with, oh my goodness, Rain Frog Interpreters giving us some awesome ASL interpretation so we can make sure we're as accessible as possible. I know that once this is posted to Facebook and YouTube permanently, that the closed captions seem to happen automatically. So, you know, if you're not catching it right now, feel free to watch the vids after. I will be posting the surveys that you'll need to take if you want to enter a raffle post this conversation. So just check our Facebook page and they will be there. If you are a youth, you can enter. If you do both the pre and post survey, you will be entered to win a free gift card. So check it out. All right. And without further ado, let's jump into it. Yeah, Meg.
Sweet. So I have a presentation. I'll be sharing my screen. I'll be going over a little bit more of like my story and why I think it's so important to talk about the intersections of being an athlete and someone who identifies in the LGBTQIA community. It's oftentimes an identity within athletics that a lot of people don't take note of, that's very much erased. And there's not a lot of stories that are actually heard in the professional level and even the collegiate level. And so I have a PowerPoint with a couple of videos and really just starting to talk about some other resources. If you're interested in this topic, getting involved with a couple different movements that are happening. And so really hoping, feel free to ask me any questions about my story, about why student affairs, why specifically talking about this topic. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to share my screen. If there's any issues, please just let me know. Great. All right, so I believe it's working.
Yes, we are here.
Yeah.
I see it.
Cool, cool,
Oh,
cool, cool.
wait, I'm pressing all the wrong buttons.
I'm pressing all the wrong buttons.
No, I am pressing all the wrong buttons. I figured it out.
Sweet. So can you see this?
Yes.
Amazing, amazing. So again, my name is Meg. I use she, her pronouns. And we're just gonna go ahead and start jumping into like again, why this topic. I want to talk a little bit more about my personal intersection and some of the things that I experienced with being a student athlete in college. Again, being a two-sport student athlete, there's two different cultures that I kind of had to find myself into, two different teams, while also trying to maintain my own identity. And so that's going to transition us into conformity into the athletic world and just starting a conversation about that. And then again, I'll talk about some of the highlight movements and efforts across the nation, and then go into a larger conversation about how you can continue these conversations and how you can continue to help. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio. That's little Meg right there. I know. Look at those ears. Those ears are still like the same size. I had massive ears when I was little. But that was me. That was T-ball. And so I was playing softball since the time I was like 5 years old up until literally I graduated college, so about 22. And now I still even play like slow pitch and stuff. And so softball has been so near and dear to my heart, with my life, with my family, with my friends. And I really started to find my own self within this sport. And so born and raised Toledo, Ohio, I play college softball at the Lord's University, which is a smaller institution, like Saya said. I was a catcher and first base, and so it was a huge passion of mine. And then I ended up running cross country, starting my sophomore year, and it was really to be part of the inaugural team. So I was part of the inaugural team for the softball team and the cross country team, and so it was just cool to have be part of that history of that institution, and being able to be a part of those teams. And so honestly, also extra scholarship money for cross country, and I was just
Talk about it.
right, this stuff's expensive. And so I was just like, might as well get it. And so there's a picture of me playing college softball.
Oh my.
Right?
That's
Serving all
intense.
the looks under that mask. And something about softball that I don't think a lot of people know within the culture and like just the environment of being on a softball team, there's a lot of discriminatory things that actually happen. And I don't know, I can't make a generalized statement for all across the country, but specifically in our area, as much as I love the sport, I also have to critique the sport I very much love. And there was moments throughout growing up playing softball, I tried to hide so much my identity within the LGBTQIA community. So I identify as lesbian, and I so badly just did not want to be like, I'm not going to be that lesbian softball player. And there's so much that I honestly didn't come out until my senior year of high school because I was so frightened by it. Even though I know so many people that I love that also identify in the community that are part of softball in the softball community as well. But there's this part of me that was just like, no, I'm just not going to be a statistic. So I'm having to fight that internal battle within myself on a daily basis with that. And there's even this saying that's called "nobo lesbo." And so I'm going to break down kind of what that phrase means, where like when someone wears a bow in their hair, that identifies that they're heterosexual. And so if you're not wearing a bow, that means you're lesbian, hence the term "nobo lesbo." And so people would get so fixated on wearing a bow.
Serious.
You said what?
It was serious. Like you had to have the bow on.
It was serious. Like it was so serious. Like people were like, "Oh, Meg's not wearing a ribbon in her hair. She's not wearing a bow in her hair." And so it got to the point where I was just like, I have a catcher's mask on one. I'm like, I don't want a bow in my hair. That hurts. It's gonna give me a headache. And so I ended up like tying one into my shoestrings. And so it was a little bit less noticeable. My own little way of like not like hiding it, but like also being like not like and like trying to avoid like
not standing out at the same time.
Right, exactly. And so sports, like that is just a complete example of how like even like homophobia can show up into the realm of sports. Knowing that like I really did like feel like even like I knew I was little, but there was so much fight in me that I was just like, no, I'm not going to be part of like the softball community that identifies as lesbian. And there's just so much part of me. And then I was just like, screw it. I'm going to embrace my identity. It's really hard. It was hard. So I don't even know. Can you even see it? I don't think you can see a bow. And no, because this was college. So I would have done that in high school. I was like, I wonder if you can see a bow on my shoelaces on my cleats, but you can't. But yeah, I loved playing softball all throughout college. My teammates are literally my family still. We have like a whole group chat, Marco Polo, all the groups. I'm all
Oh, that's so lit.
It's honestly so cool. So you should come meet them. You would love them. If you ever like want to find yourself in Ohio, you're like, no.
Oh, my baby.
So yeah, there's just a little picture of me there within playing college softball. And then there's me. I got my degree from the institution, bachelor's in social work with a minor in business administration. And at that time, I was like so dead set. I was just like, I don't want to go into student affairs. I really am thinking about like doing stuff with social work. At the time, I was interning with the Board of Community Relations for the city of Toledo. And essentially, it's almost like the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, like what you would find at like a university, but it's for the city. And so I was working
Wow.
Yeah, it was super, super cool. Like I met Andrew Jackson, who was like the right-hand man for Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Like I literally like shook his hand, helped him like get his hotel and everything. Yeah, it was so cool. And then we put on like the MLK Service, like Unity celebration for the city. A bunch of stuff. Worked with like the NAACP. I was like sports. The NAACP and helping the city create a brown and black coalition and helping like create an actual like partnership with the police department there. And so it was a really awesome opportunity. And so I was just like, I'm gonna be so set on social work, but lo and behold, I'm still living on a college campus.
No, but that's awesome though. Like I feel like you've had an impact in so many different ways. And then there was that time you were also working with Red Cross, right?
Yeah. So as a college athlete, thank you, Sai. I totally would have forgot about that. I'm so glad you know me. So when I was a sophomore in college, I was part of the Red Cross Collegiate Leadership Program, and it was specifically for sophomore student athletes within the NAIA, which is kind of like an NCAA, but it's just a smaller organization. And essentially through that, I was able to go to Washington, D.C. for 2 weeks to the national headquarters of the Red Cross. I learned from the president and CEO of the Red Cross, the president of biomedical services. I'm really close with the national chair of the Red Cross now still because I'm a mentor for the program. But essentially, I got that opportunity by being a student athlete. And still I'm continuously doing the program every single year. And so I just wrapped up, I think, my 6th year with the program. And so it's continuing to help students all across the country and even the nation become blood drive coordinators on their college campuses. And so even like right now with COVID, like I've been supporting students through how do you get blood drives on your campus with everything going on with the pandemic. And there's a lot of like information out there going right now. It's like, it's really essential to donate blood, especially if you recovered with COVID because you're antibodies. So a quick little plug, like if you by chance did have COVID, you could potentially save some more lives if you've donated blood. So find your local Red Cross. But yeah, so I had like multiple different opportunities with being able to run blood drives, impact communities in a multitude of ways. And so forever grateful for Lord's University. Thank you all for the experience and everything that you all taught me, because then it led me to University of Denver, graduated master's in higher education with a concentration in diversity and higher learning. Like Saya said, I worked for our cultural center and supporting student activists on campus, student organizations, specifically affinity groups. Did a lot of like Heritage and History Month programming, partnered with a lot of community partners and campus partners with making sure that we are navigating the changes of higher ed in the best ways possible. And like University of Denver, like went through so many different changes while we were there, Saya. Like, you remember the cultural center literally went through like 3 different name changes.
Child, I still recall.
It's like our identity center was going through an identity crisis. Like, it was so ridiculous. It was so fun though. And yeah, I would love to move back to Denver eventually. We'll see where life takes me. But after following graduation with my master's in higher ed, I am now working for Texas Christian University as a hall director. And so what that means is essentially I supervise resident assistants. I supervise a multitude of different students, from cultural connectors to hall crew to desk assistant, so lead desk assistant. And essentially I run the entire operations of my building that houses over 260 students. And so from the budget to the programming to facilities and work orders and maintenance and all that great stuff. And so you said what?
Your boss.
I'm a boss. Hey. But this is my RA staff. I completely love every single one of these individuals. I always say that I hit the lottery with my first RA staff. That was us winning an award during RA training, and they mean the absolute world to me. So being my first staff, especially in this position, they were so kind. I learned so much from them, and they taught me so much about my position and like how I want to supervise and be someone within student affairs that can be so impactful. And so they inspire me every single day. This picture is literally on my desk. It's on my wall. Yeah, they're the cutest. They're the cutest. Oh, I love them. So yeah, there's just a little bit more about my story. And so I wanted to jump in a little bit more about talking about like erasure, conformity, and apathy that's found, especially within athletics, and then more specifically, even within college athletics. So many people, the statistics are like over 400,000 students every single year get to have their dream come true with playing college sports at the NCAA level. There's even more if you break it down to the different divisions and different organizations like the NCAA. Like, again, like kind of talked a little bit about the NAIA, but even the NCCAA and a slew of other different acronyms that I'm sure I don't even know. But it's really that next step for students, and specifically student athletes, to get to that next level of sport every single year. And so potentially fulfilling their dreams of becoming a professional athlete one day, an Olympic athlete, whatever it may be. But there is, again, as much as I love sports, and I get a lot of interesting comments because of how much I love sports. I'm the first to critique organizations like the NCAA and how coaches and the power structures of athletics. And so it's something that I am very passionate about. And so I also want to kind of talk about that within team dynamic, and when you think about the dynamics and power dynamics, or what it looks like with coaches and captains of teams and athletic directors, there's definitely a culture of being silenced as a student athlete because maybe it doesn't fit into the vision of your coach. Maybe it doesn't fit into the vision of the athletic director.
What do you say? It sounds like it's very like high. There's a hierarchy, right? It's right. Like what the captain says goes. What the coach says goes.
Right, exactly. And if you think about like the money makers of an institution, like the biggest money makers are going to be housing and then athletics because of ticket sales and stuff. And so there's almost like this power, and there's a lot of conversations about paying student athletes. So what does that mean if you were then physically potentially an employee of the institution, how would that further silence you? Yeah. And like, how do you have to like watch your back, especially like Texas is an at-will state. And so it's like, essentially like I could get fired tomorrow for no reason that they have to give to me.
True. That's wild.
Yeah. And so it's really interesting. We'll get further into some of the different organizations that are kind of fighting some of these things and really starting to put in policies and procedures in place with organizations like the NCAA. But there is a culture, again, of silence. Like Saya said, like with the hierarchy of you kind of have to follow that power structure. It's like, okay, coach said, it's coach's rules. Otherwise, maybe I won't have access to my education. Right? They have the power to take that away from me. They have the power to take away my scholarship. They have the power to take away so many things, my housing, especially if like the sport is paying for the room and board. And so that power dynamic is so, so powerful. It encourages athletic communities to keep their sexual orientations, gender identities, diverse expressions out of the conversation because they're like, I have to conform into this mold. I have to conform into
and in a way, you are representing your university, you're representing your school. So in a way, they want you to stay on brand and not politicize anything because, you know, sexuality gets political.
Exactly. And even thinking about like religiously affiliated institutions like TCU. I'm grateful that TCU is pretty open and pretty accepting of the LGBT community, but there's obviously people within our community that aren't. And knowing the implications of what that can mean for a student, and specifically a student athlete that's playing football, that's on the court, that's playing volleyball, having to hide that. Otherwise, what does that look like for the team? And like, especially institutions that are really, really big, what does that do to the institutional image? And so a lot of people try to shed away from like those controversial topics. And like, it's very unfortunate that like our identities, when it comes to our sexual orientations, gender identities, gender expressions, etc., that they are so politicized, especially at a collegiate level.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
Don't do me.
And so going into a little bit more research, so research shows that LGBTQ athletes drop out of sports at a rate dramatically higher than their heterosexual peers or avoid sports altogether. And so thinking about, like, if you were to think about 5 LGBTQIA athletes right now, professional athletes, it may be a little bit harder for you to actually identify them, because whether they drop out of college because they haven't been feeling accepted, they didn't have a community around them that allowed them to feel loved and cared for. Maybe they felt like there was like so much internalized hiding that had to happen, kind of like how I felt, that they're just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm not feeling like myself. I can't be part of this team. And so then there's a larger conversation of how your education and your next steps in life can be so tied to your athletic sport. And so if you don't go through with it, how are you paying for college? How are you getting to that next level, to your dream job, to that dream sport? And so sometimes people just avoid it altogether so they don't have to go through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last part, the culture of sport that encourages apathy over action. And so that comes back into, like, again, that power structure of I can't take action. I can't speak out on these different injustices that our nation's facing, or even that I'm facing. Otherwise, what does that mean for, does that then look like a team stance or an institutional stance? And then like what, again, like what's the larger implication of that? And so there's a lot of apathy. So apathy being like inaction, people just kind of avoiding, not really engaging or having involvement with social justice and the movements that are happening, especially in our nation. And I want to highlight a couple different stories. And so the importance of sports and athletes, right? And so thinking about social media and influencers, athletes in sports are really some of the greatest socialization mechanisms in the world. So athletes' roles are shaping culture and values, especially on different platforms. You'll see like Dwayne Wade rocking some great sneakers, and he's actually a great ally, especially for his daughter who just came out as transgender. I think it was over this past year. And so his family has been stepping up in some of the most beautiful ways for our community. Go ahead.
No, and what you were saying too about having that influence on the culture, I think even like the stereotypes of, regular everyday jobs, well, maybe not everyday jobs, but like, wanting to move up and get that promotion, right? You see the stereotypical talking about sports in order to connect with your potential employer in order to get on their good side. Like, it's very ingrained in the culture.
Right. Yes. Oh my gosh, that's such a great example, Sai. That's such a great example, because like sports is sometimes the only bonding that a lot of people can have, especially like in a workplace. Like I've experienced it at TCU, where it's just like, I know like there's this guy across campus that like I know he's into sports and I'm into sports, and that's literally like the only way that we talk. Otherwise, like I don't know if you ever respect me. I don't know if like we would ever have a conversation like outside of that. And it's just like it is shaping culture in a way. It really, really is, and like the values in which we hold. And I think sports is like one of the greatest teachers in life, especially for athletes, of expectations, setting boundaries, conflict resolution. Like if you're not getting along with a teammate, like how do you communicate that? How do you communicate with one another on a team? And so like even talking about like creating culture, like teamwork culture in team environments, sports is a huge way of being able to do that and exercise that. Thinking about, again, like media and commerce, so like buying things, there's a lot of athletes with like brands out there. Like LeBron James has his own sneaker line, like they almost have like their own sneakers, their own socks, their own shirts, like all of it. And so they bring a lot of attention to a lot of great causes now, and especially there's been such a surge in revitalizing some of the activism that a lot of athletes have. And so a lot of times, like thinking of them as like the influencers, like talk about like social media influencers, you see all these different people trying to sell products and stuff, but seeing some athletes really starting to use their platform in a positive way to bring light and start conversations. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second too. But I also just want to take note, like this is this picture to the right is such a powerful movement and a powerful moment, especially in the Olympic realm. So in 1968, the black salute from John Carlos and Tommy Smith at the Olympic podium. Those were gloves that were actually given to them by the man standing on the second podium right there. Those were originally his, and he gave it to them. And so witnessing that great expansion of athletic activism in history, and seeing like how this moment and moments before this, like this is not the only one, continue to show up in our world today. And so it's like we're living through right now a lot of things that history books are going to tell. Hopefully. Am I wrong though?
I'm trying to mind my business.
And so like I'll click to the next slide and start to talk about, so like Colin Kaepernick, right, taking a knee, bringing light to police brutality, specifically towards the Black community, but also people of color, and how much scrutiny, how much criticism he has been put under and is continuously put under years even later. And like this picture was taken. He's still trying to get back into the NFL, still trying to make his dreams happen through sports.
And what always stands out to me about this moment was, because originally, and please correct me if I'm wrong, originally he was sitting during the national anthem.
Yep.
And it was actually a veteran who informed him that it would be more respectful if he would kneel during the national anthem, so that at least he's showing some homage to veterans and to active duty members, right? Yep. And so it's interesting to me, that was always interesting to me to learn that you can't win. Like you just literally, like, what do you want?
Right. People are just like, oh, have you ever talked to like a veteran? Well, yes, he has. He's just like, no, not that guy. I'm like,
no.
You want to be what?
But that just reminds me of what you were saying before, of how you really don't have a voice. People just want you to shut up and play ball.
Yeah. They really just want you, and I'm going to talk about this, shut up and dribble. Like that was literally said to LeBron James. And I'll show a clip of that in a second. But people literally, they're just like, we don't want to hear your voice. We want your entertainment. We want your body to entertain us while we watch it. Like in a sense, it's like on the court, on the football field, we don't care about your rights. We don't care about your voice. And so this is like literally such a huge example of that, of being like, he literally had a dialogue and a conversation. I'm so glad you brought that up, with a veteran. He was just like, taking a knee is so much more respectful. Like they take knees for when like people pass, like specifically like veterans and active like military members, when they pass away, like they kneel at the tombstone. And so it's actually like a sign of respect. And he's like in like that realm of the world. And it's like, he's just bringing to light like the brutality, the police brutality that's happening and continuously happening. Yeah. And then this is the women's national soccer team. And so you probably saw, like, this is Abby Wambach is the second on the right. She was super, super, super huge with getting equal pay for women, specifically women who play soccer, but also just women athletes in general. They started a large conversation within the professional world of athletics, talking about how women are so drastically paid, from the Women's National Basketball Association, the WNBA, to soccer. They are so huge at trying to make sure that women that are trying to have children, that they get maternity leave, that they are able to have proper health insurance and housing. Those are conversations that you really don't have to worry about with the men's sports. And even like, yeah. And so you'll see there a couple other players. Megan Rapinoe, she's also super huge and a huge advocate for women's national soccer team and the WNBA. She's been doing a lot of work in both and continuously trying to make sure that women are being represented, that they're sitting at some of these tables and these large decision-making things that are happening in the professional realm. This is Natasha Cloud. She actually just, this is something a little bit more recent. She actually decided to decided to forego this upcoming Women's National Basketball Association season. So she is not going to be playing this season. It's typically like happening right now. And she was just like, no, like there's a larger cause that I need to be focusing on. There's also another WNBA player who foregoed last season so she could help someone get out of jail who was so wrongfully accused and was literally in prison. And so seeing how important like athletes really are making such huge movements right now in a drastically different way that we've seen before in the past. This is honestly probably one of the most recent activism things within sports in a larger setting. So this is with the Professional Softball Association, like their league. Again, obviously I'm a huge fan of softball. If you haven't known already. But this is a team called the Scrapyard Dogs. That's what it is. But they are starting this movement called This Is Us. And essentially where this movement started to come about was because the owner, was it the owner or the manager? The manager of this team, she ended up like tweeting something out in a very political sense and did not get consent from the players. And their picture was used saying like, this is saying something that they did not believe in. Like the tweet was not in line with their values as players. And so now there's this huge movement to get that manager out. And then they started to create their own. And so this is specifically within the softball realm, but also they're trying to uplift women into this. So not necessarily just softball players, but they have different merchandise. They have different petitions out. They're speaking out and using their platforms and really bringing to light how athlete bodies are used in mixed messaging and how they aren't really even getting consent from people that are paying them to actually use their bodies in this way. And so again, talking about that power dynamic, like they're not even getting consent and like their bodies are being used in ways that they do not approve of.
And yeah, I just can't even imagine. So you can't even stand up for the things you want to stand up for. And then your image is used to promote something that you may be completely against.
Exactly. And so it's like bringing that voice back. When we talk about telling our stories and talking about how we want to talk about our stories and like make them so impactful, like every single one of these players were so disrespected in that sense because their narratives and their stories were essentially, again, erased and put out there as a generalized statement that did not align with their own values, but were representing the larger organization.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah, it's completely ridiculous. And then I wanted to bring up Jason Collins. He was the first openly gay man in the NBA. And I honestly want to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, in professional sports. And so you'll see there he has a pride flag dog tag and just like talking about his story. He's super open to talking about his stories. You can Google him right now, look at YouTube videos. And this was in 2013. That's only 7 years ago. And so this is still something that is still being erased in athletics, of the fact that he is the first openly professional man player in any sort of professional realm in 2013. Just imagine all those years of erasure and having to conform to team dynamics and
all the people who are, because we know, right? Just because they're not out don't mean they're not there. So, you know, the people who, you know, are still having to fight that battle and make those really difficult decisions.
Right. Fighting the battle too of potentially being so discriminated against, especially like talking about people who identify as like being a man, like toxic masculinity that falls within that. Like sports is definitely huge on that, especially like football, basketball. You see that toxic masculinity on a day in, day out basis of like man up, tough up, all those things are so activating and so dismissive to how someone identifies. And you see that, and it's like it took this long, since 2013, for someone to come out in that way, and just imagine this, how afraid they were like before then, and like having
not knowing what kind of reaction they were going to get.
Yeah. I think he ended up like quit playing basketball like that next season. And like, so he's done a lot of work with like the Human Rights Campaign and being just like really open and out within his experience as being a professional athlete. So
That's awesome.
yeah. So I just want to highlight a handful of those stories. There's so much more. So definitely encourage you to continue researching that. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about erasure. And Saya, we already kind of like hinted at it. So shut up and dribble. This was I'll let the story be told in the video. But I just want to show you how how athletic voices are so erased in multitude of ways. And so thinking about the intersectionality of knowing that 2013 was like the first openly professional athlete coming out, and then the intersection of being an athlete, right? Having the LGBTQ identity and being an athlete, and also hearing some of this erasure with being able to actually voice what you want to voice and how it's met. Play the video.
What if your email magically CC'd all the right people?
Well, what if?
But what if? I love Slack.
Then it wouldn't be. Slack. Choose a better way to work.
What a great app.
Slack.com.
Sometimes the people that are telling these players to shut up and dribble a basketball are less informed than players are.
Oh, and LeBron and Kevin, you're great players, but no one voted for you. Millions elected Trump to be their coach. So keep the political commentary to yourself, or as someone once said, shut up and dribble.
People try to box players in, and I guess for their own comfort, put them in a category so that they watch LeBron James for entertainment, not for his opinion, is what the person who told him to shut up and play basketball would say. And I would argue that sometimes the people that are telling these players to shut up and dribble a basketball are less informed than players are. And just because you sit behind a news desk or you sit behind any desk and spew off a few facts that somebody else probably looked up for you, does not make you any more qualified than anyone else to have conversations, especially on the impact of these protests and the social climate that everybody has to live in.
So just even the nature of like the dehumanization of that term, shut up and dribble. Like, your body is meant to entertain us. We don't want to hear your opinions. We don't want to hear it comes out of your mouth. You weren't qualified to do this.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's almost like you're a character. Like, you're not multi-dimensional. Like, you don't have different, I don't know, just life. It's so interesting.
Wow, that's such a good point. Oh my gosh, like thinking about like actors and actresses, like how they have to like just like switch it up in a second, being like, okay, now I have to show this emotion. I have to go do this. I have to go do this, hide this part of myself, and like put on this whole new masquerade. Wow, Saya, that was profound. That was such a great example, Saya. You're so brilliant, Saya.
Oh, thanks, friend.
I was like, wow, I don't think I've ever thought about it in that way, but it truly is like an act, like you're performing, right? And so people continuously try to like dehumanize athletes in this way. So yeah. And then we'll talk a little bit more about More Than an Athlete. So this is a campaign that LeBron James actually started. I don't know if it was actually in response to Laura Ingram's comment, but this is something that really highlights all the movements and all the great community work that LeBron James does, and bringing to light, it's like, you're more than just this athlete. You're more than just this person that's here to hit a ball, shoot a ball. Like, you're a worthy human being of having these in-depth conversations, these very critical questions. I'm a huge LeBron James fan. And he even has shows like The Shop that's really having like, if Saya, I know that this is kind of your thing, like dialogue sessions, really in-depth dialogue sessions about what are the greater things happening in this world? How does this impact us? How does the world of sports start to influence a change in this nation and across the world? And so he has a lot of great projects out there. He opened up a whole school. He opened up the I Promise School. It's in Akron, Ohio. And he just added a whole transition village that's literally housing for people who go to the I Promise School who they couldn't afford housing, especially like in a pandemic right now. So more affordable rent, up to date appliances, and just functional living areas. And so he's doing a ton of great work, but I really wanted to highlight this conversation with more than an athlete. So a little bit more about my work at Texas Christian University is being a hall director. I'm the hall director of what is kind of considered the student athlete dorm, and being so inspired by LeBron James, I actually brought a lot of programming about more than an athlete to our building, just because I have a lot of football players, a lot of people on campus. If they are walking around, they see a big bulky man walking around, they're like, "Oh, you play football?" And specifically, man, at that, do you play football? And they're like, "No, actually, I'm just here to go to school." And so there's a lot of conversations about, especially that on campus right now, you are more than just this athlete. You're an artist. Like I always tell this story of one of my favorite football players. I know not a lot have favorites, but he's one of my most favorite students I've had in my building. I'm not going to use his name, but he is super into art. And he just like walked up into my office one day. This is pre-COVID. And he was just like, "Meg, I'm going to draw you something." I was like, "Oh yeah, what are you going to draw me?" He was like, "I'm going to draw you a paint can." And I was just like, "Okay, bet. Like, I want to see this. Like that could get kind of interesting." And I was like, "I want to see this paint can." And I tell you, like, he did so good. Like, he did a paint can, and then he like did like this whole spray can, and he like was coloring something in like on a wall. Like, it was so good. It was just like raw talent. And like time and time again, like I've like had to get like different things done, like with art and graphic design. And he's just like, "Meg, like, let me do that for you." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah." And like, he has like created some of like the most incredible things. And so it's just like knowing his story, a lot of people probably wouldn't know that side of him. And so that's why I kind of want to tell it, because so a lot of people, like, if you would like, a lot of people wouldn't even ask to see what his passions are outside of his sport. They probably wouldn't have asked to know about his family, or like what are some of the things in life that mean most to him. And so like art is a huge getaway for him. Art is a way of expression. And so LeBron James within this, I apologize, I think there's like potentially one curse word. Is that okay?
I mean, we're here.
Okay. Cool. But he's going to kind of describe in response to kind of the first video of like, what does it mean for him, and like, what does this movement mean? Oops.
SpaghettiOs.
And I told Mav, I said, "Mav, I'm sick and tired of every time I do an interview that whatever I say is twisted up. And it's always interrupted. And they only put out what they want to put out. They only put out what they want the rest of the world to see. And then the perception of who I am and the perception of who we are as athletes is always changed."
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Man, we need to start a platform. We need to figure out a way where what I say cannot be interrupted. What I say can't be sliced and diced and onto the world of the public to make us look smaller than what we really are, because we're not small. We're actually giants in this world of sport and in this world in general. And long story short, several years later now to today, where we're in July 10th, 2019, where we're hosting a party for all the greatest athletes in the world, and our brand is called Uninterrupted. Where our platform is uninterrupted, where we allow every single athlete in the world to say what they want to say, no filter. Nobody that can take away from what they're saying, what they believe in, how they feel at that very moment. If it's personal, if it's funny, if it's serious, if it's towards politics, if it's towards sports, if it's towards anything, we wanted to empower athletes in a way that the world has never seen before. So obviously, I know y'all see a lot of shit get said about me. A lot of things get said about me. And I will continue to take the arrows and the bullets and the shots and the rocks and all that shit to allow my fellow athletes, men and women, to stand tall every fucking day. So thank y'all. And while I do all that, I ain't going no fucking where. I'm here to stay. All right?
Feeling it.
Feeling it. And so the brand Uninterrupted, you can follow them on Instagram. They do a lot of things on HBO. They do a lot of different social media campaigns, etc. But they have a series called More Than an Athlete that has multiple different episodes to it. And so highly encourage you continue to look into this and follow this movement. They are continuously pushing out information, conversation topics, and having really in-depth dialogues about their impact and how athletes have been so silenced before, and now they're trying to find an empowered voice within them to start to bring to light a lot of these different things. So one other resource that I really wanted to hit onto is Athlete Ally. This is, again, more specific to colleges, and they kind of have this phrase, playing for pride. Athlete Ally is something that I heard about a handful of years ago while I was actually at the University of Denver. I heard about it my first year in grad school and have been like continuously looking at this as a resource. You hear similar things, and we'll talk a little bit about the Campus Pride Index. Campus Pride Index essentially rates institutions based on their LGBTQIA inclusiveness, from housing to police departments to meal plans to like meal plans.
Y'all can't eat. Yeah, you can't eat.
To housing, to health centers, to how they access counseling, a slew of different things within the context of higher education, scholarships, admissions processes, etc. And so Athlete Ally specifically focuses, they kind of have an index similar to Campus Pride Index, but again, it focuses more on the athletic realm in college. And so their mission is to end rampant homophobia and transphobia in sport and to activate the athletic community to exercise their leadership to champion the LGBTQI plus community. They are doing a ton of great things. I highlighted two of them, some of like their biggest milestones. And the first one, they launched the Historic Athletic Equality Index. And I'll open up this link so we can just kind of scroll through some of like the most salient takeaways from the information that they've collected. It's the first of the kind ranking of the LGBTQ plus inclusiveness of college athletic departments. And then they've also successfully lobbied the International Olympic Committee to include sexual orientation in the Olympic Charter. And so starting to really show visibility and representation within sport. And so they are doing some incredible work. And I'm going to open up this PDF to see. So you can kind of see this is just a very expansive, again, it's 53 pages. We're not going through all 53, but I will show you just a couple institutions, and I'll use TCU as a little example. Let's scroll down. This is about the Athletic Equality Index. So to scale, they developed a score and accessibility of the NCAA Division I. So there's 3 different divisions within NCAA. So they're specifically looking at Division I right now. Their commitment to providing and publicizing comprehensive non-discrimination policies, LGBTQ plus resources and educational materials, an inclusive fan code of conduct. And I'll kind of talk a little bit about that, of being like, if there's homophobic or transphobic slurs, can that fan be thrown out, right? So that would be like an example. Policies for transgender student athlete inclusion, student athlete initiatives relative to LGBTQ plus inclusion, out or ally trained athletic staff members, a co-hosted event supporting LGBTQ plus inclusion, and then a reoccurring LGBTQ plus inclusive initiative or campaign. I want to highlight the reoccurring because it kind of is an accountability structure to institutions in a way that other indexes I haven't really seen before. So again, it has to be that reoccurring. And then within like each of the institutions, they'll show what that reoccurring definition means. This is more of like the methodology, breaking it down even further. So having questions, does the school have non-discrimination policies which explicitly protect the sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression of LGBTQ plus faculty, staff, students, and varsity student athletes? Another one, do schools have LGBTQ plus specific resources that student athletes can access? This one I think is really huge too. Have schools adopted and made accessible a written policy for transgender varsity student athletes? That's a huge conversation in higher ed in general of having written policies, especially when you think about freedom of speech. Sai, like you were there when that was a huge topic for us too at the University of Denver. But having like written policies laid out and publicized, showing that commitment and showing your stance, that's big. So there's a handful of questions that the schools will then go into, and then each category, if you'll see along the left-hand side, will go into the scoring, and then changes in scoring from the 2017. So there's been two iterations of this index. So one in 2017, and then one in 2019. And so this is December 10, 2019. So this is a handful of months ago. So it's the most up-to-date one. But just to highlight some of those biggest takeaways. So a lot of these, like they're comparing from 2017 to now. So you'll see on average scores for all 65 schools increased by 10.3 points. So on the points, it's up to 100 points. 8 schools earned a 100 on this year's Athletic Equality Index. And those are listed right there. I think one of the biggest percentages, and when it comes to the numbers, over half the schools, a 378% increase from 2017, now follow the NCAA policy for transgender varsity student athlete inclusion. That's almost 400% increase in 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge, because I know that was like a strong issue.
Yeah, that was a huge issue. One of the schools on here, they scored negative 45 out of 100. And now that was in 2017. And so this index is really making and putting a lot of pressure, needed and healthy pressure, onto institutions to make a change and really start to look at their policies in a more in-depth way. And then
accountability.
Exactly. It's the accountability. And then over half the school, oh wait, I just read that one. I want to say, so as of 2019, 12 schools, and this is up from 5 from 2017, have a full fan code of conduct that protects against homophobic and transphobic language, while 52 schools, nearly 80%, have a fan code of conduct that protects against harmful or disruptive behaviors in that sense too. And so this index is really putting together, again, a lot of accountability, a lot of pressure needed on schools right now. These are just more general overviews, but I want to go a little bit more in depth. I'm going to show you TCUs because they're doing some good things.
And then you should show us a bad example.
Yeah, I'll show you. I'll show you. Yeah, here's a good one. I got you. So we scored a 35 out of 35 with our non-discrimination policy for accessible resources, 20 out of 20. LGBTQ inclusive fan code of conduct, 10 out of 10. Follows NCAA policy for transgender inclusion, 10 out of 10. LGBTQ student athlete group or initiative, 0 out of 10. So that's something as an institution that would get us to that 100% out of 100, or the 100 out of 100. And so,
yeah, and that's something as simple as making a group that's visible.
Exactly. And so I would love to be on the inside look of what this index and how it measures it, because if it's like, I would love to see their definition of what it means to be like an active group, that actually meets, or initiative. It doesn't, even thinking about like the initiative, so it doesn't need to be a group. Like I have some questions on the definition of what that means. And then they have outspoken or allied staff, 5 out of 5. Collaboration with campus group, 5 out of 5. And then pro LGBTQ campaign or statement, 5 out of 5. And I think that could be as simple as an Instagram post.
And I think what I love about this and the Campus Pride Index is, and being a student athlete and not being a student, I wouldn't think about this anyway, but even if I were a student athlete, it would give you ideas of things like I wouldn't even thought of, oh, is there a group that's LGBTQ for my specific team or my specific school of athletes? I think it's interesting that it kind of gives you a little bit more idea of like what your school could be doing. Right.
And then how would they, because I definitely see, and also another critique with being a student athlete versus a non-student athlete is that there's a lot of divide within the culture of a campus between that. And so what would it look like if like we specifically merged like our spectrum, which is our LGBTQ student organization. What would that mean if like there was an LGBTQ student athlete group, if they could join efforts?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is a good one. This is a good one. University of Oklahoma, I need you to do better, but I need this next school to do a lot better. You already see it, 0 out of 100. Baylor, womp womp. Need you to do better, friend. So literally 0 out of all of the possible points for non-discrimination policy, accessible resource, LGBTQ inclusion fan code of conduct, follows NCAA policy for transgender inclusion, LGBTQ student athlete group or initiative, outspoken or allied staff, 0. There's not even staff.
Wow. What do you think? Where do you think this comes from? Why do you think it said 0?
I can pull up. So Baylor is very much focused in their Christian roots in a way of like, they believe that marriage and love is between a man and a woman. And so that they definitely have like what they would call like the traditional, right? The air quotes, the traditional view of what marriage is, especially in Texas. This is the Bible Belt. And so like moving here from Denver, I was honestly so nervous. I was like, oh, Denver being a little bit more of a progressive city, and then moving to Texas in the Bible Belt. It's very interesting. And I know that they have a statement. I'm going to see if I can find it. Human sexuality. They have a human sexuality statement. So Baylor welcomes all students into a safe and supportive environment in which to discuss and learn about a variety of issues, including those of human sexuality. The university affirms the biblical understanding of sexuality as a gift from God. Christian churches across the ages and around the world have affirmed purity and singleness and fidelity in marriage between a man and a woman as a biblical norm. The temptations to deviate from this norm include both heterosexual sex outside of marriage and homosexual behavior. It is thus expected that Baylor students will not participate in advocacy groups which promote understanding of sexuality that are contrary to biblical teachings.
All right.
Yeah.
I could pick that apart, but I'm not going to.
We can.
Don't get me started.
We can.
Here all day. It'll be turned into a very different talk.
Right. So knowing that that's like their human sexuality statement as an institution, that provides a lot of context to why maybe there is no outspoken or allied staff. Again, Texas being an at-will state, thinking about job security and job protection, there's probably a lot of pressure for staff that work there to not be out, to not be an advocate, to really push those bounds and start to make it like a different narrative on that campus. And so that's an institutional stance. And so it's pretty interesting, pretty scary. 0 with collaboration with campus group, and then 0 with pro LGBTQ campaign or statement. Yeah. It's tough.
Couldn't be me.
I could not.
What was it like for you being a college athlete? And I'm assuming that this index was not something you knew about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just your experience, especially in college and maybe later high school when you were kind of becoming more confident about your identities, right? What was that experience like for you, and what support did you receive, or how did you find support?
Yeah, so I was so lucky to have, and I was trying to surprise you all, to have my coach kind of join us in this conversation, because she was such a huge person for me with my sexuality and getting like an understanding of what it meant to identify in the community and play softball. So she also identifies in the community. She's been married to her wife for probably close to 20 years now. And like, they're the most beautiful couple. Like, they are literally my relationship goals. Like, that's what I'm They're literally the cutest. And so she actually brought up potentially starting an organization at our institution. It never came to fruition. It was like my senior year, and it was just a mess of like trying to figure out my next steps. And it never was truly approved by our institution at that point. And so there's just not enough time. And so I just think about if this index was around back when I was in college, that I would be able to better look for people who are in my corner for things for me to like people who I can go to, people that could help me find people that are advocates and policymakers and change makers on campus, and being able to start to pinpoint some of these things in my institution. Yeah. So yeah, I think that athletic equality index, I just hope that people really start to dissect some of these terms and like what that means. And so it can help inform them into their next steps too. And then go ahead.
No, that was fine. You just mocked me. But anyway.
I did.
Oh. Anyway.
Okay, so just kind of wrapping up the conversation. So what can you do now that we've kind of talked about this? I got super passionate about it, gave you a couple different examples, some people and icons that you can look for that are really trying to make change in society and across our nation in a multitude of ways. Continue these conversations, continue to dissect and ask questions, ask critical questions, ask why. Why are things here? Why are things in place in this way? Have we considered integrating new policies, new procedures? So continue the conversation, ask questions. Ask your friends about their passions outside of their sport. Be like, what are you passionate about? Like, I get it, you're super into baseball, but what else are you involved in? Like, do you like music?
Do you find that when you were in sports that like it was very much focused on sports and not really anything else?
Yes, I would say there was a lot of that,
Really?
especially growing up, that my passion like was my sport. But with going through college, I was just like, this sport is not going to be my life. Like my body is falling apart. I'm sure I'm gonna need new hips in the next couple of years. Like literally tore apart my body. And so like it became real when I got in college and saying like this sport is not going to be how I make money in the future. It's going to be a part of me and like a hobby for me. But I need to have more passions outside of that. And so even when I'm going to lie. I feel like I kind of lied to you because I played the saxophone for like 7 years throughout like middle school and high school. And so that was a huge passion for me too. I was like super into jazz. I was like part of the jazz band and was able like to play in different places across like our community. And so like just asking those questions as much as like the sport really is a part of like maybe how you identify and like who you are and like the values in which you hold, like that's great. That's so important. Hang on to that, but know that you're more than just that sport, right? Like you're more than just that athlete. So I encourage you to continue to find different things that you're passionate about. Great question, Saya. Great question. Talk about the intersectional identities that can be found on teams. From neurological diversity to sexual orientation to religion. Religion's huge as well, that you can talk about and saying like, I had so many different friends growing up that identified in different religions. And there was times I went to like mosques and visited mosques with them, and really started to ingrain myself into different knowledge of cultures and religions. And so really start to talk about these intersectional identities, not just necessarily how you identify with it, like being an athlete or anything like that. Discuss the power dynamics of sports. Again, we talked about that heavily. Talk about how coaches can impact you. Like my coach was such a huge impact. I'm so lucky that she's an incredible woman, but some coaches can really like make or break sports for you. And so that hurts in a sense. And so discuss some of these power dynamics and the ways in which sports can like show up into your life. And then again, toxic masculinity. That's a huge one that can continuously be broken down in multitude of facets in this world, but specifically in sports.
Oh, terrible.
Yeah. I'm
God
like,
off.
I could like have like a whole other hour with you all and like talk this through. But yeah, so those are a handful of things that you can do to continue the conversations, continue to show up for the people in your life that maybe are super passionate about sports. And specifically who identify in the LGBTQIA community, really make them feel heard and be seen and valued for who they are in the holistic ways in which they show up. So, yay! That was kind of my last slide. So I'm gonna stop sharing.
Yeah, I thought actually we do have a little bit of time.
Yeah.
I did want to get a little bit of your opinion on toxic masculinity and how that does show up. And I think I think we have, not that we have, but I think there are a lot of stories around toxic masculinity and I think even bigger gender roles too. Because what's interesting, the bow really stood out to me. The no bow, let go thing
Yeah.
was actually me a lot because in a way the bow is a very feminine thing. At least that's what we've said it is. It's a very feminine thing, and that's how you so I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about gender roles and expectations in sports and how that plays into toxic masculinity and whatever other issue.
Yeah, I think even thinking about specifically masculinity, like you talk about even in like the lesbian community, you talk about alpha woman, and then like there's like an alpha in the relationship, and then there's not, right? And like, what does it mean to be alpha?
The
Like
top or the bottom?
what?
The top or the bottom?
The top or the bottom, right? Who has like the more masculine traits? Who's in that way? Like who's the alpha? Who's seen in that way? And so even in the lesbian community, like we definitely fall into masculinity and masculine expectations all the time. Like who's like more of like the man in the relationship? Like I've heard people say that. I'm just like, oh my gosh, stop it. And what does that even mean? But in the terms of sports, you see it of like don't throw like a girl. Where it starts to break down, being like diminish women in that, and being like women don't deserve to be played. They don't deserve to be on this field. Don't throw like a girl, right? And so like there was
you said me like the Sandlot too.
Yes. And, like, and so like that's one example. Like we hear that all the time, and so how like men completely like devalue women's sports. And so right now, like the NBA is getting a lot more mindful of it and like starting to advocate with women and like trying to advocate for their rights and really starting to focus on that. And so like the WNBA and the NBA have such a great partnership where like this is something like I tweeted out a while ago of like the Major League Baseball League, the MLB, they don't really advocate for anything with softball. Like softball players professionally, they have to have sometimes 2 to 3 jobs because they do not get paid anything. And so like how is masculinity? Yeah. Wow. So masculinity, you said what?
I didn't even think about that.
So how is masculinity playing into that? Like, don't throw like a girl. They're not going to sit and advocate with us. They don't want to see us eating. They don't want to see us eating in that way, right? And so masculinity in football, like having to like man up, take the hit, take the blow to the chest, whatever it may be. Like those are those expectations. Like there's no crying. The fact that like the first openly gay man was in 2013, probably because he probably would have not been seen as masculine, right? And like, oh, like he identifies as gay. No, like that's
and
not.
I do think that's also interesting too, is the idea of being masculine in order to play sports. That's an interesting like just assumption that we have. Like what if he was a little feminine or was very feminine? Why couldn't he still play the sport? If he can catch the ball, he can catch the ball. So I don't understand.
Yeah. And like, especially like, I was called tomboy growing up because I played softball. So I was called tomboy, And so even like the concept of like boy being in that, how is masculinity continuously portrayed onto women that play sports?
Wow. That's great. That's wild. We are open up to questions, y'all. Questions. Please send them into the comments section. And if you ain't got no questions, child, it is what it is. You can always reach out to me. I can get you in contact with Megan Moziniak, and get any more questions answered, y'all. If you are an LGBTQ athlete, you need to know what resources are available to you, especially if you are thinking about playing in college. What does that look like for you? Even if you're not out right now, we really, now is the time to really start thinking about that, and, taking advantage of these resources, getting involved in programs such as Uninterrupted, right? Look at me remembering stuff. Love that. So yeah, totally. Even if it's after this video has aired and you're just watching this on the backside, no worries. Feel free to reach out, ask questions, and we always want to answer anything because we're just trying to get people where they need to be. So I'm not seeing any questions popping up. That's totally chill. But Meg, do you have any final thoughts for us?
No, thank you so much for your time, Sai. Thank you for thinking of me with being able to talk and just share space with you and other people that will be viewing this video, hopefully in the live stream. Please reach out to me. I would love to be a resource with being able to talk through anything that you're going through. I'm definitely here to listen and just be a support, obviously from afar, most likely being in Texas, by FaceTime. I have email, I have all the things, Google Hangouts. There's one time Saya and I, we had a Google Hangout.
She's a digital queen, y'all. She got everything. Right. She got it together.
If you want to follow me on social media, if you want to stay connected in that way, I would love to be able to do that and be
where can the people find you?
Find me on Instagram, Megan Moziniak, Meg Moziniak. I got rid of the Megan.
Ooh, come on, brand change.
So Meg Moziniak, Megmosiniak. So that's my handle for Instagram, Facebook, Megan Moziniak, Megan. So follow me, hit me up. Would love to be able to talk with you all a bit further.
And if y'all could not tell during this talk, this girl is ride for you. She will answer your questions, take you under her wing. She'll make you food if she could. Like she will support y'all. So please reach out, follow, email, whatever you need to connect to get the resources you need, right? Closed mouths don't get fed up in here. So you got to reach out, let us know that you need it. And like I said before at the beginning, we will have a pre and post survey. It's totally cool if you want to take the pre-survey as well as the post survey. I'll be posting them at the same time on the Facebook page. Please feel free to take it out. It helps us out. And if you are a young person, ages 13 through 21, you can be entered into a raffle to get a gift card. Child, talk about easy, free money. Y'all sleeping, wake up. And with that, just last thank you to Meg once again, coming to us from Texas. What? Virtual is crazy. So we're able to connect in this way. And also shout out to Kendra once again for giving us and keeping up with our nonsense, interpreting this session. Really appreciate Kendra's work because I know it's tiring. And with that, we will see y'all on Thursday. Quick kind of overview of what's happening. Thursday, we are going to have a speaker still at 6 o'clock talking about leadership, rebel leadership, excuse me. What does it look like? How do you, especially as a young person, how do you tap into your own leadership potential, finding your niche and all that cool stuff? So join us on Thursday. And then next week, we got a fun topic on white guilt in the LGBTQ plus community. For that conversation, especially with everything going on in the world. This is a conversation that is coming to the forefront. So join us next week for that.
I'll be tuning in.
Ciao. And I also believe next week on Thursday, we will be having a talk on the theater. Ciao, the theater. Hold on, I don't want to be telling y'all misinformation. I'll be lying sometimes, I'll be capping. Yes, a career in theater, building community through telling our stories with Samuel Wood. So please come in next week, Thursday, if you are interested in, a career in theater and what that could possibly look like, the steps you need to take. So, we're trying to get y'all some resources, trying to get y'all some skills. So show up, show out. And with that, y'all, I will stop talking and let's keep it clean, queer, under control. See y'all next time.
Bye.